I didn't expect the first story to stick with me the way it did. Most of the time, I scroll through posts like these late at night, half distracted, half curious. The glow of my phone pressed too close to my face, while the rest of the room fades into shadow. You read one, maybe two, and then you move on. That's how it's always been. Disposable fear, a quick rush before sleep, something to make the dark feel just a little more alive. But this one didn't let go. It was written like a confession. No dramatic buildup, no exaggerated language, just a simple title. My sister keeps standing in the hallway at night. I almost skipped it. The post started off normal enough. The writer explained that they lived in a small house with their parents and younger sister. Nothing unusual. Suburban, quiet. The kind of place where the loudest thing you'd hear at night was the hum of a refrigerator or the occasional car passing by. The kind of place where nothing is supposed to happen. That's what made it work. They said it started a few weeks ago. At first it was just small things. Waking up in the middle of the night for no real reason. That strange feeling you get sometimes, like your body pulled you out of sleep because something wasn't right, even if you couldn't explain why. Then one night, they rolled over and saw her, their sister, standing in the hallway, not moving. The bedroom door had been left slightly open, just enough to see a thin slice of the hallway beyond, and there she was, framed perfectly in that narrow gap, completely still, facing the door. At first they assumed she was sleepwalking. That's what I thought too. It's easy to explain things away when they almost make sense. They called out to her, quietly at first. No response. Then a little louder. Still nothing. She didn't react. Didn't even seem to breathe. Eventually, they got out of bed and walked toward the door. And this is where the story started to feel wrong. Because the closer they got, the more they realized something wasn't lining up. The hallway light was off. The only illumination came from their room, a dim yellow glow stretching across the floor and stopping just short of where she stood. Her face wasn't visible. It should have been. Even in low light, you can make out features. But hers was just dark, like the light refused to touch it. They reached the door and opened it wider. "Sarah?" they asked. Nothing. She was still there, still facing them, still perfectly motionless. And then, just as they were about to reach out and touch her, she stepped back. Not like a normal step, not a shift or a stumble. It was too smooth, too controlled, like she had been pulled backward rather than moved on her own. She disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. That should have been the end of it. A weird moment, a creepy memory, something to laugh about in the morning. Except it wasn't. The next day, they asked her about it. She said she never left her room. And yeah, that's the part where most stories lose me. It's a common trope. Someone denies something that obviously happened, and we're supposed to just accept that something supernatural is going on. But the way this was written, it didn't feel like that. Because the writer didn't jump to conclusions. They brushed it off, said maybe they dreamed it, maybe they were still half asleep. Maybe their brain filled in the gaps and made something out of nothing. That's what made it believable, because that's exactly what you do. For a few nights, nothing happened. And then it came back. This time, they didn't wake up naturally. They woke up because of a sound, a soft tapping. Not loud, not urgent, just consistent. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the hallway. They didn't move at first, just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince themselves it was something normal. Pipes, the house settling, anything but what they were thinking. But the tapping didn't stop. It kept going. Same rhythm, same pace. Tap, tap, tap. Eventually, they turned their head toward the door. It was open again, just a crack. And through it, they could see her, standing in the same spot. Only this time, she wasn't still. Her head was tilted slightly to the side, and her hand was raised, tapping against the wall. Slowly, deliberately, like she knew they were watching. That's when the writer did something that, honestly, I don't think I would have done. They pretended to be asleep, closed their eyes, slowed their breathing, stayed completely still. The tapping continued for a while. Then it stopped. Silence filled the house again. And after what felt like hours, they opened their eyes. The hallway was empty. The next morning, they checked the wall where she had been tapping. There were marks, small, faint dents in the paint, in a straight line, at the exact height her hand would have been. That's when things stopped being easy to explain. They confronted her again. This time, she got upset. Not defensive, not confused, upset. She started crying and told them to stop making things up, that she hadn't been in the hallway, that she didn't even wake up during the night. Their parents got involved. They brushed it off as stress, said maybe they were having vivid dreams, suggested they get more sleep. Normal explanations, reasonable explanations, the kind that make you question yourself. So they tried to ignore it. For a while, it worked, until the third night. This time, when they woke up, the door was wide open, and the hallway wasn't empty. She was closer, much closer, close enough that they could finally see her face. And that's where the post ended. No description, no explanation, just one final line. I don't think that's my sister anymore. The second story didn't try to ease you in. It didn't pretend to be normal first. It started wrong, and somehow kept getting worse. The title was short. There's a voice in my car that isn't mine. That alone was enough to make me pause. The writer explained that they drove a lot for work. Long hours, empty roads, the kind of drives where your mind starts to wander just to stay awake. Late nights mostly. Highways that stretch on forever, lit only by the occasional flicker of passing headlights or distant signs. They said they were used to being alone. That's important, because when you spend that much time in silence, you learn the exact shape of it. You know what your car sounds like. The engine, the tires on asphalt, the soft hum of air through the vents. You get familiar with every tiny noise. So when something new appears, you notice. It started with something small. They were driving home around 2 a.m., somewhere between towns, when they heard it. A voice. Quiet. Too quiet to make out words. At first they thought it was the radio. Sometimes signals cut in and out, picking up fragments of other stations. It happens. But the radio was off. They turned it on just to be sure. Static filled the car. No interference. They turned it back off. Silence again. For a few minutes, everything was normal. Then, there it was again. A whisper. Right behind them. Not from the speakers. Not from outside. From inside the car. Close. Too close. They checked the rear-view mirror immediately. Nothing. Backseat empty. Of course it was empty. They were alone. They even pulled over, got out, opened the back doors, checked the floor, looked under the seats. No one. They laughed it off. That nervous kind of laugh you give when something doesn't make sense, but you don't want to admit it scared you. Got back in, locked the doors, kept driving. The voice didn't come back that night. And just like the first story, that's what made it worse. Because if it had kept happening right away, you'd know something was wrong. You'd deal with it. Panic maybe, but at least you'd be certain. Instead, it left. Gave them time to doubt themselves. Days went by without anything strange happening. They convinced themselves it was just exhaustion. Until it happened again. This time, it wasn't a whisper. It was clearer. Still quiet, but distinct enough to recognize as speech. They couldn't make out the words, but they could hear the shape of them, the cadence. Like someone speaking softly, just out of reach. Again, it came from behind them, and again they checked. Nothing. No one. But this time they didn't pull over. They just kept driving. Faster, as if distance would somehow fix it. The voice continued for maybe 10 seconds. Then it stopped. just like before. And again, nothing happened after that. Not that night, not the next. But something had changed. They started driving with the radio on. Not loud, just enough to fill the silence. Because silence now felt wrong. Silence meant space, and space meant something else could fill it. A week passed, then two. No voice. They started to relax, started to feel stupid for being so shaken. And that's when it came back. Only this time, it spoke clearly. They were on a back road, cutting through a wooded area to save time. No streetlights, just their headlights carving a narrow path through the dark. That's when they heard it, right behind their right ear, saying their name, softly, perfectly. They froze. Not physically, the car kept moving, hands still on the wheel. But everything else just stopped. Because it wasn't just a voice anymore, it was familiar. It sounded like them. Not exactly, but close enough that it made their skin crawl. They didn't turn around. They didn't check the mirror. They just kept driving. And then it spoke again. This time, a full sentence. I wouldn't look back. That's when they hit the brakes. Hard. The car skidded slightly before coming to a stop in the middle of the road. Silence. Complete silence. They sat there, heart pounding, hands shaking on the wheel. And slowly, they looked in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. But something felt wrong. Not visually, just wrong. Like the space itself wasn't right. Like something had just moved out of view. They turned around fully. Nothing. Still empty. They let out a breath they didn't realize they were holding. And then, the voice came from the front, from the passenger seat. You looked. They said they didn't remember the next few minutes clearly. Just that they drove. Fast. Faster than they should have. Didn't stop until they reached a gas station. Bright lights flooding the car, people moving around, normal life happening like nothing was wrong. They stayed there for an hour, too scared to get back in. Eventually they did. Nothing happened on the drive home. No voice, no whispers, nothing. But the story doesn't end there. Because the next day, they checked something. Their dash cam. They didn't even remember turning it on, but it had recorded the drive. The footage was normal at first. Road, headlights, darkness. Then, at the exact moment they heard their name, the audio picked something up. A voice. Clear, close, but it didn't sound like them. Not exactly. It sounded like multiple voices layered together, saying the same thing, overlapping, out of sync. They replayed it several times. Each time, it sounded slightly different, like it was trying to get it right, trying to match them. And then, at the end of the clip, just before they slammed the brakes, the audio distorted, and one final sentence came through, perfectly clear, perfectly accurate, in their own voice. You shouldn't have looked. After that, the writer said they stopped driving at night, took a different job, sold the car. But every now and then, late at night, when the house is quiet, they still hear it. Not behind them, not in another room, but close, right next to their ear, practicing. The third story was longer than the others. Not padded, not dragged out, just detailed in a way that made everything feel deliberate. Like every piece mattered, even before you knew why. The title read, My Apartment Has a Maintenance Access I Was Never Told About. It started simply. The writer had just moved into a new place. Not fancy, not terrible. Cheap enough to afford a loan, which was the main selling point. One bedroom, small kitchen, narrow living space. The kind of apartment you don't plan on staying in forever, but you can tolerate for now. At first, everything was fine. Quiet neighbors, no strange noises, no issues with plumbing or electricity. For the first couple of weeks, it felt like a good decision. Then came the first odd thing, a draft. Not constant, not strong, just occasional. They noticed it while sitting on the couch one evening, a faint, cold brush of air across their arm. enough to make them look up, expecting a window to be open. But all the windows were shut, locked. They checked anyway. Nothing. They shrugged it off. Old buildings do that sometimes. Air finds its way through places it shouldn't. That's what they told themselves. The next time it happened, it was stronger, coming from the hallway, specifically the wall at the end of it. There was nothing there, just plain drywall. No vents, no doors. Nothing that should allow air through. Still, the draft was undeniable. They stood there for a moment, holding their hand up, feeling it. Cold, steady, coming from somewhere behind the wall. That's when curiosity kicked in. They knocked on it. Solid. At least, it sounded solid. They pressed their ear against it. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Just silence. And yet, the air kept coming. That's when they noticed something small. A line. Faint. Running vertically from about waist height to just above their head. It was subtle. Easy to miss unless you were looking for it. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. An outline. Like a door that had been painted over. They tried to open it. Nothing. No handle, no latch, no give. It didn't move. Eventually, they let it go. Again, just one of those things. Old building. Weird design. Not worth worrying about, but it didn't stop. The draft became more frequent, stronger. Sometimes, they'd wake up in the middle of the night and feel it brushing across their face. Cold enough to pull them out of sleep. Every time they'd check. Every time, nothing had changed. Until the night it finally did. They woke up to a sound. A soft click. Barely audible. But in a quiet apartment, it stood out. They sat up in bed, listening. Nothing. Then, a faint creak, coming from the hallway. Slow, like something shifting. They got up, walked toward the door, opened it. The hallway was dark, but not empty. The wall, the one with the outline, was open, just slightly. A thin gap, pitch black inside. The draft was stronger now, pouring out from the opening, cold and steady. They stood there, staring at it, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Because that door had never opened before, not once. And now it was just there, waiting. They didn't go in, not immediately. They turned on the hallway light first. The gap didn't change. The darkness inside didn't recede. It stayed black, too black, like the light wasn't reaching inside at all. They grabbed their phone, turned on the flashlight, shined it into the opening, and stopped. Not like it hit a wall, more like it just faded. Swallowed. That's when they should have closed it, ignored it, gone back to bed. But they didn't. They pushed it open, slowly. The hinges didn't make a sound. Inside was a narrow passage, barely wide enough to walk through. Concrete walls, no insulation, no wiring, just a tight, unfinished corridor leading deeper into the building. Or maybe between the walls. It was hard to tell. The air inside was colder, and it smelled damp, stale, like something that hadn't been exposed to fresh air in a long time. They stepped inside, just one step, then another. The light from the hallway stretched behind them, barely reaching past the entrance. Everything ahead was swallowed in darkness. They kept the flashlight steady, pointed forward. The beam trembled slightly with their hand. The passage extended maybe 10 feet before turning. They hesitated, then kept going. Each step felt louder than it should, echoing faintly off the concrete. When they reached the corner, they paused, listened. Nothing, just that same heavy silence. They turned. The passage continued, longer this time, and at the far end, another opening. A doorway. No door, just a frame, leading into something darker, wider. They moved closer, slowly, carefully. The smell got worse. Sharper. Rotten. They covered their nose with their sleeve, still stepped forward. And then they saw it. A room, small, maybe the size of a closet. But it wasn't empty. There was furniture, a chair, a mattress, old, stained, and on the wall, scratches, dozens of them, deep, jagged, running in all directions, like someone had tried to claw their way out. They stepped inside, just enough to look around, and that's when they noticed something that made their stomach drop. The mattress wasn't dusty. It wasn't covered in debris like everything else. It looked used, recently. That's when they heard it. Behind them, a soft shift of movement from the passage. They turned quickly. The flashlight beam snapped back toward the hallway, and for just a second, they thought they saw something, pulling back around the corner, too fast to make out, too real to ignore. They didn't wait. They ran, back through the passage, out into the hallway, slamming the door behind them. This time, it closed, fully, seamlessly, like it had never been opened. They didn't sleep that night. Didn't leave the apartment either. Morning came. Everything looked normal again. The wall was solid. No outline. No gap. No sign that anything had ever been there. They contacted the landlord. Asked about maintenance access, hidden spaces, anything. The landlord said there wasn't one. Said the building didn't have internal access corridors like that. Said it wasn't possible. So they dropped it, or tried to, until 3 nights later, when they woke up again, to that same cold draft. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from their bedroom, from the wall right next to their bed, and something, on the other side, knocked back. The 4th story was shorter, but it hit faster. No slow build-up, no easing into it. Just a single idea, executed in a way that made it linger longer than it should have. I started getting notifications from an app I never downloaded. It began with a screenshot. A simple push notification that read, "You left at 2:14 a.m. The writer explained they had been asleep at that time. They lived alone, no roommates, no shared accounts, no one with access to their phone. At first they assumed it was a glitch, some leftover notification from an app they forgot about. So they tapped it. It opened nothing. No app, no history, just their home screen. They checked their installed apps manually. Nothing unfamiliar. So they ignored it. Until the next night. Another notification. You came back at 2:26 a.m. That's when it stopped being easy to dismiss. They checked their phone settings, battery usage, permissions, background activity. Nothing. No app tied to those messages. No data usage spike. No trace. And yet, the notifications kept coming. Each night around the same time. Always describing movement. You opened the front door. You stood outside for 3 minutes. You went back inside. They started locking their bedroom door. Not because they believed it at first, but because not believing it didn't feel safe anymore. Then one night, the notification came earlier than usual. 11:48 p.m. You are in the hallway. They were in bed. Lights off. Door locked. They didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just stared at the screen. And then, another notification. Immediately after. You are looking at your phone. That's when they checked the door. Still locked. They forced themselves to get up. Walked slowly toward it. Every step, careful. Quiet. They pressed their ear against the wood and heard something on the other side. Breathing. Soft. Steady. Matching their own rhythm. They backed away. The phone buzzed again. You heard it. They didn't open the door. Didn't call anyone. They just waited. Eventually, the breathing stopped, and so did the notifications. For the rest of the night. In the morning, everything looked normal. No signs of forced entry. Nothing missing. Nothing out of place. But that night, they got one final notification, different from the others. No timestamp, no movement log, just a message. Next time, I'll come in. Less immediate, more creeping. The kind that builds in your head after it's over. I think my dog is watching something I can't see. At first, it was harmless. The dog would sit in the corner of the living room and stare at the wall. Dogs do that sometimes. But it became consistent. Every night, same time, same spot, same fixed gaze. The writer tried to break the behavior, called its name, clapped, even stood between the dog and the wall. Nothing worked. It would just shift slightly and keep staring, like whatever it was looking at was still there. Then came the growling, low, constant, not aggressive, not defensive, like a warning, but not to them, to something else. One night, they decided to test it. They sat beside the dog, looked at the wall, and waited. At first, nothing happened. Then, they noticed something. A shadow. Faint, not cast by anything in the room. Too tall, too thin, stretching slightly across the surface. They blinked. It didn't disappear. The dog's growl deepened. And slowly, the shadow moved. Not across the wall, but off it, like it was stepping forward. That's when the dog barked, loud, violent, and the shadow snapped back into place, gone, like it had never been there. The dog stopped barking immediately, sat down, and kept staring. The writer said they moved out a week later. The dog still stares at corners sometimes. Sharper. The kind that leave just enough unsaid to make your mind do the rest. I heard my mom call me from the basement. She'd been dead for 3 years. The writer lived alone. There was no one else in the house. They didn't go downstairs. Not that night. Not ever again. I keep seeing someone wave at me from my window. They lived on the 14th floor. There was no building across from them, no balcony, no ledge, nothing outside the window. Just open air. But every night, around the same time, they'd see it. A hand, waving, slow, patient, waiting for them to wave back. They never did, because deep down, they knew. If they acknowledged it, it might stop waving.